welcome to Who's the Bossk? It's a Star Wars podcast from laughingplace.com. My name is Mike Celestino. I am your host. I am the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars content at Laughing Place. This is episode number 181 of Who's the Bossk, and we will be discussing the fifth episode of the third and final season of the animated series from Lucasfilm, Star Wars: The Bad Batch, which is coming out right now on Disney Plus. And for that discussion, I have invited back on the show my friend and fellow Laughing Place contributor, Luke Manning. Luke, how are you? Thank you for coming back on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm doing good. How's about yourself, Mike?
Yeah, not too bad. We had kind of a shared experience a couple nights ago.
Yeah, we did.
Which I have a fun story about later, but we both were kind of covering this event called Disneyland After Dark, Disney Channel night. I was there at the park running around taking pictures and video, and then you were at what we call the home office, I guess.
Yeah.
Down in Orlando. What was that evening like for you?
Yeah, it's a lot more difficult when you're on the East Coast covering a West Coast event that happens at night, because then you're there trying to put stuff up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So not the easiest
Right.
thing to do at 3 o'clock in the morning, but not that anything's really fun to do at 3 o'clock in the morning. But yeah, no, it was a good time. We've definitely done a lot of these Disneyland After Dark things together, and I think the next one coming up is Star Wars night.
Yes.
But
very excited for that.
Yeah, Disney Channel night looked interesting. I think you were there, so you would probably have a better opinion than I would, but I think there's probably more they could have done to make it fun. But
yeah, I thought it was fun. I mean, I'm always excited for new stuff, and a lot of this felt new to me, especially in terms of Disneyland After Dark, which I've covered almost all of them, and they start to get a little repetitive after a while.
Yeah.
So I was excited to see a new one, and yeah, I had fun. It seemed like they, the people there were very excited. They kind of mashed up Disney Channel and what I would call Disney Afternoon, but I don't know if those shows were on Disney Channel as well, like the DuckTales and Darkwing Duck, and
yeah, I mean,
I grew up with.
They definitely were like started out in syndication or on ABC,
Yeah.
But I think in the early 2000s, late 90s, you definitely would have seen them on Disney Channel, or even Toon Disney,
right?
Which was another channel, which is now Disney XD.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, definitely not these days, but in the early 2000s, late 90s, you probably would have found them on there.
So some people would have known them from the Disney Channel. You've been up to quite a bit of traveling for Laughing Place. I wanted to ask you, you've been to some of the international parks recently. Tell me about those experiences.
Yeah, so in November, I went to Hong Kong Disneyland for the first time, for the grand opening of World of Frozen, which is their spectacular new land that's themed all around Frozen. Getting to see Hong Kong Disneyland for the first time was such a strange experience. I remember walking in to the park on my first day. I took they have like a garden walk, where you kind of walk from the hotels to the park, and it's this long walk. And I just remember feeling like, what am I doing? Like, everything feels familiar because you see banners of Iron Man and Star Wars characters and Disney characters everywhere.
Right.
But you're like, but here are these mountains, and I'm in Asia, and I've never been to Asia before. So it was a very strange experience, especially like walking onto Main Street there. It's like uncanny valley, because a lot of it is very identical to Disneyland, but you have these small differences which are very noticeable if you're used to Disneyland.
Right. And then you got to go to Paris as well.
Yeah, no, Paris is a resort I'm a lot more familiar with because I grew up going there. And I had visited earlier, or in 2023, also for Laughing Place. So I was there just about a month ago for a week. So I got to explore Paris a little bit. make good use of my hotel and my time in the park. So I definitely got to do everything I wanted to do over and over again, which was nice.
That's great. Yeah, and it's so cool that our particular vocation gets to offer us those opportunities to kind of see some of the international theme parks. I personally can't wait. Hopefully, get to go to the Tokyo parks sometime soon. Kind of crossing my fingers.
You've got a good chance for it
Yeah,
with a certain celebration taking place
yeah.
nearby.
That's what I'm hoping for. Exactly. So we are going to be getting into a discussion of the Bad Batch in a little bit, but first we have to take care of an order of business called the 5 Star Wars questions. By the way, if you are watching live on the Laughing Place YouTube channel, you can comment along. We'll be happy to address any questions or concerns you may have. Luke, are you ready for the 5 Star Wars questions? This is level 2 since this is your second time on the show.
I am ready, and now I know that it's my second time. I wasn't sure if it was second or third, so
I'm pretty. I hope I
it's good.
did
It's
my
good to
research
know.
correctly. Hopefully, you haven't answered these questions before.
I don't remember answering them. So
Okay, 5 Star Wars questions, level 2, number 1. Do you have a favorite line of dialogue in a Star Wars movie or television show?
So the first thing that came to my mind when I read this question wasn't any specific line of dialogue, but it's just every single ridiculous thing Palpatine says in Revenge of the Sith and Return of the Jedi. You
Okay.
know, just the way he performs.
Yeah.
A lot of those lines, like, "Oh, I'm afraid the shield generator will be quite operational when your friends arrive." You know, lines that are seemingly very simple, but the way that Ian McDermott performs those,
Yes.
very, very fun. So a
Yeah.
close second would be Anakin and Obi-Wan's everything they say to each other in their fight on Revenge of the Sith. I think
Okay.
not necessarily because it's good, but just because it's so quotable.
Right.
It's so great.
Absolutely. Yeah, Ian McDiarmid is just kind of chewing the scenery and in a wonderful, wonderful, memorable way. So
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
definitely agree on that one. Number 2, which Star Wars planet would you choose to live on and why?
So my thoughts in selecting this is that Star Wars planets are all they're basically the extreme of one thing. So like you have Hoth, which is all snow all the time,
Yeah.
or you have Coruscant, or I'm sorry, you have Tatooine, which is all
Yes.
desert all the time. So like, you know, you have to really like one of those climates. So I'm a guy that really likes his creature comforts. I like living in the city, so I'm gonna say Coruscant.
Okay, of course, sounds a good choice. Yeah, the kind of the center of everything going on in the
But
Star Wars galaxy. Yeah.
definitely higher up in Coruscant. That would be
Okay.
the goal rather
Yeah.
than the seedy underbelly of everything.
Yes. Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. A lot of stuff going on down there that you don't want to be a part of.
Yeah.
Number 3, do you have a favorite era in the Star Wars storytelling timeline? The examples I always give are the Old Republic, which is thousands of years before the original trilogy. Then you've got the High Republic, which is a couple hundred years before the prequel trilogy. Then you've got the prequel era itself. Then there's the Reign of the Empire, which is between the prequels and the original trilogy. Age of Rebellion is what we call the original trilogy, Galactic Civil War era. The New Republic is where The Mandalorian takes place and all those other shows around there. Then there's the Rise of the First Order, which is what we're calling the sequel trilogy era. And I also like to include the Legends timeline, which is all those non-canon books and stories that have kind of been pushed aside in favor of the new Disney era canon. Luke, of those, do you have a particular favorite and why?
Yeah, so I'm not super familiar with the Old Republic or anything from Legends.
Mhm.
So you know, I think being someone of my generation, I think I'd have to go with the prequel era. Not necessarily because I like the prequels any more than the original trilogy, but I think that there's a lot more I think there's a lot more going on in terms of worlds and
Yeah.
um, of the ability to explore, and the gaps that are built in, like the 10-year gap between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones,
Right.
everything happening in the Clone Wars as well. There feels like there's so much more storytelling opportunities that have
Yeah.
been explored and still could be explored in that time span. And I think the same is true of the original trilogy, but I feel like there's just a little bit more to the prequels. And then as far as the sequels go, I don't think it's been expanded upon quite as much as the other eras, and
Okay.
maybe that's something we'll get to in time.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be some more projects coming up that we'll get more of that soon. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'd have to go with the prequels.
Okay. Yeah, definitely something can't really argue about the prequel era is the amount of world building that got put into that
Yeah.
period. So I think that's a great choice. Number 4, if you could pick a Star Wars creature to have as a pet, which would it be?
This one was easy for me, and this goes back to going to Galaxy's Edge and picking up one of the toys. It's
Yeah.
the little puffer pig.
Oh, great. I don't think we've had that
Um,
choice before.
Good. I'm glad I came up with a unique one.
Yeah.
I love specifically the toy. You just squeeze it and it makes a sound. It's ridiculous, and they're really cute. So
Puffer
I think,
pig.
yeah, I think that they would be a good one to have around.
That's a great one. Yeah, we've gotten a lot of loft cats. I thought that's where you were going when you said the creature stall. So
Loftcat is also a good
yeah.
is also a good choice, but
As a cat
I'm
person,
glad I
yeah,
went with a
I'm
unique one.
yeah, yeah, great fun choice there. Number 5, fifth and final of the 5 Star Wars questions, level 2. I like this one a lot. This is pretend you're Kathleen Kennedy, president of Lucasfilm. You can invite any filmmaker or author, any creative person out there to come in and pitch their own Star Wars story. Who would you like to see working in the Star Wars storytelling universe?
This one was like immediately this name came to mind, and I'd have to say Greta Gerwig.
Okay.
Um, I think having seen Barbie was one of my favorite
Yeah.
movies of last year, and actually ended up being one of my favorites really ever.
Okay.
And I recently watched Lady Bird as well, which is another one of her films. And she has a very unique storytelling way of telling stories, and can be a little tongue in cheek, can be
Yeah.
very clever. And we haven't really had too many female voices in the world of Star Wars,
Sure.
and I think hers would be a very unique one. And considering how well Barbie did just in the financial terms and in the zeitgeist of the world, really, I think if I were Kathleen Kennedy, I would have been on the phone to her straight away, like, hey, you want to come do something with us?
Yeah.
And obviously she's in demand because she's doing the new Narnia films for
Oh,
Netflix, I think.
I hadn't heard about that, but that's
Yeah,
interesting.
she's doing a new take on Narnia.
Okay.
um so yeah, um that shows she can do a big franchise type thing, and I think that would be really cool to see.
That's a really interesting choice. I loved Lady Bird. Really loved
Hmm.
her Little Women adaptation, and then really enjoyed Barbie as well. And very interested to see what she's doing next. Obviously, I didn't know about Narnia, but I'll look forward to that too. And yeah, I'd be very curious if she would be interested in doing a Star Wars. Obviously, we know she has some familiarity with sci-fi and maybe some passion for sci-fi, because Barbie opens with that whole homage to 2001: A Space
Yeah.
Odyssey, right? So that would be very cool if she would come aboard the Star Wars universe. That would be great. Okay, that's the end of the 5 Star Wars questions. Let's do some Star Wars headlines really quickly. There's actually one that broke this morning that I wanted to add to the list here. We're getting a new audiobook original from Lucasfilm Publishing. And Kevin Scott, writer Kevin Scott, he's been on this podcast several times. I'm a big fan of his writing. He's a super nice guy. And this one's going to be called Star Wars The High Republic Tempest Breaker. and it looks like it's going to feature the character Lorna D, who is also the central character in Cavan Scott's previous audiobook, which was called Tempest Runner. So this is sort of a pseudo sequel to that. Very, very excited for this. That's coming out in December 3rd. So a little bit away, a little bit of a wait for that, but pretty excited. Do you know the High Republic at all, Luke? Have you explored that at all?
No, that's a little far out of my reach.
Okay.
It's one of those things where anytime that, because they do this sort of thing with Doctor Who as well, where they'll like
Yeah.
create a new world of stories that are, there's comics, there's novels, there's all sorts of different types of ways to get into it. So it just feels, to me, it feels very hard to find a breaking in point,
right,
when there's that much content.
Well, the High Republic is a good place to start. If you like, just look at the timeline of like which books take place first, because it is like High Republic right now is the earliest the earliest events in the current canon. So you could just like jump in right there at the beginning. By the way, Cavan Scott, who's writing this audiobook and has written a bunch of the High Republic, I know he's done a bunch of stuff with Doctor Who as well.
Yeah, that's where I've seen his name attached to a
Okay.
lot of these books, but that's where the name originally comes from in my head, is a couple of Doctor Who books.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not a Doctor Who person, so I haven't read any of his stuff from there, but I love his Star Wars writing, so I'm sure it carries over to other franchises. Speaking of the High Republic, we had a new comic also written by Cavan Scott that came out this week. I thought it was great. High Republic Phase 3, number 4, and then also Star Wars, the current volume of Star Wars, number 44 by Charles Soule. Great week for Star Wars comics. I actually thought both of these were wonderful, terrific issues. The main Star Wars flagship comic, they're getting into the trial of Lando Calrissian, which it doesn't even involve his betrayal of like Han and Leia in The Empire Strikes Back. It's actually he's on trial for stuff that he's done in the comics, like since then, because all this is set between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and he kind of betrayed the rebellion. He sold some rebel information to Jabba the Hutt in the comics, and now he's on trial for that. I'm very, very curious to see how they get from this, how Charles Soule, the writer, gets from this point where Lando's at his lowest, and he has to get to the point where he's a general in the Rebel Alliance in the beginning of Return of the Jedi, so I'm super curious how they handle that. And you said you haven't really checked out any of the Star Wars comics, right, Luke?
There was one I remember reading, and I can't remember what it was. This was maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
And I can't remember what it was.
Okay.
But I know I've done one. I know I've read at least one full set of Star Wars comics.
Well, there's some great ones out there. This current run, the current arc of Star Wars, the main Star Wars comic, it's just called Star Wars by Marvel Comics. Writer Charles Soule. He's such a great writer. Probably him, Claudia Gray, Cavan Scott, some of my favorite writers working in Star Wars right now. Let's get into Disney parks. We got a big announcement this week about Star Tours. So we knew there were new adventures, new destinations coming to Star Tours. This got announced, I want to say at Star Wars Celebration last year, or D23 Expo, maybe the year before. And we didn't really know all the details. I think we knew something, maybe Ahsoka was coming. And then this week, we got confirmation that, yes, Ahsoka is going to be part of it, but also Andor and The Mandalorian are all going to be represented in these new adventures and destinations coming to Star Tours. This is starting on April 5th, so less than a month away. Now, this coincides with the beginning of Season of the Force at Disneyland here in Southern California. Down there where you are in Central Florida, I don't think you guys have any seasonal Star Wars celebration going on, but you're also getting these new Star Tours adventures on April 5th. Luke, what are your thoughts on this? Are you excited for these new Star Tours destinations?
Yeah, no, I don't know if I'm in the minority on this, but I think I still like if I'm at Hollywood Studios or Disneyland for that matter, I still think I would go on Star Tours over going on Millennium Falcon.
Oh, me too.
I think it just number one, it has the repeatability factor, and
Yes.
this is going to make it even more so. So I'm hoping they do the thing where at least when these first start, that you're guaranteed to get
Yeah.
one of the new ones instead of, because that I remember that always being really disappointing when you would show up expecting something new and it's like, you're on Kashyyyk again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it'll be really cool. So I'm imagining you're going to get like a message from either Ahsoka and or the Mandalorian in the middle, and then get to visit. It's with the whales. I don't know their actual name, right?
Purrgil, yeah.
So I know that that's confirmed for the Ahsoka part, but then we're still kind of figuring out what might be the Andor section and what will be the Mandalorian section.
Yeah, I'm super psyched for this. Like you, I also prefer even the current Star Tours. Yeah, my favorite is still the original Star Tours, but I do like Adventures Continue, and I do prefer it over Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run.
Yeah,
I just think it's more fun, I think if somebody put those two rides in front of me and there were no wait for each, I'm gonna choose Star Tours every time. I hope that eventually we get around to them doing this kind of thing with Smuggler's Run, where you're introducing new missions. Like that to me was always like part of the appeal of having a ride like that. Like, why wouldn't they? I don't know.
I assume that would be,
yeah.
I know there were a lot of rumors about that being a thing, and I assumed, I mean, that's been open for, it'll be 5 years this year.
Yes.
So I'm very surprised that they haven't done that already.
Me too. So that's coming April 5th, Disneyland, Walt Disney World at Disney's Hollywood Studios.
And Disneyland Paris.
Right. All those 3 locations, and very, very excited for that. And we'll have more. Follow laughingplace.com for all your Disney parks and Disneyland.
I am sure you will be the one there.
Let's hope so.
Getting some photos of it.
I hope so. I do want to tell a quick story. And Luke, you were kind of there again from the home office for this. But I was at Disneyland a couple nights ago waiting to cover Disneyland After Dark, Disney Channel night. I had my usual dinner at Cafe Daisy, which has become my go-to place in the park in Toontown, because they have great gluten-free pizza there, and I love it. It was wonderful. Again, enjoyed my dinner. I was just going to wander over to Galaxy's Edge, and I was leaving Toontown. I went under that tunnel out into Fantasyland by Small World, and I heard Jon Favreau's voice. It just jumped out of the crowd to me, and I looked to my left, and he's walking into Toontown with a big group, like maybe 8 to 10 people. But he's in the lead with what we call a plaid, I guess. What would you call it? Like a tour guide, basically.
Yeah, it'd be like a guest relations tour guide. But plaid is usually what that's definitely what cast members refer internally to them as.
Yeah, and I mean, this kind of always one of the little tricks at Disneyland, especially because it's in Southern California near Los Angeles. If you see a plaid with a group, this is always my instinct. I don't know if you do this, Luke, but I always look to see who they're with, because it could be a 100%. Celebrity. Yeah,
especially I used to work at Disneyland, so anytime a plaid would show up at an attraction, it'd be like you'd pay a slight bit more attention, because you'd be like, oh, who are you? And that's how I saw Daisy Ridley once. So
cool. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I've seen a good number of celebrities that way. And so I only noticed Jon Favreau in this group at first. First of all, he's really tall. He's like 3 feet taller than me. Probably not that much, but very big guy. And they passed me going the other direction into Toontown. Of course, my instinct is to immediately turn around and follow them. So I did a little minor light stalking as they went into the lightning lane for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. And I was like, okay, they're going on the ride. I don't have a lightning lane pass, so I'm not going to go be next to them in the ride, as I might have done if they went into the standby line. But instead, I just kind of sat there. I just kind of found a table and sat there and waited. By the way, I would not do this for everybody. I mostly tend to leave celebrities alone, especially in the parks. They're having a good time. They're usually with their families. Jon Favreau, I'm just a huge fan of his achievements in, you know, filmmaking. He's like ushering in this new era of filmmaking with the volume and everything, kind of forwarding this technology, and he's been doing that for a while with all is kind of an experimental filmmaker in a weird way, as in addition to making all these very like high profile, very popular, you know, The Lion King to me was an experimental film. Like
I mean, he kicked off the MCU as well.
Exactly, yeah. MCU, Star Wars, everything he's done has been, to me, on the forefront of like forward-looking filmmaking, and just so excited to see him and hopefully to get the chance to meet him. I was sitting there watching the exit. I saw them come out into the gift shop there at Runaway Railway, and then I noticed he was with Dave Filoni, who is another one of these guys right now who, you know, he's basically the next George Lucas. He is the chief creative officer of Lucasfilm. So he's the center point guy of everything coming from Star Wars for probably the next generation. And I was freaking out at that point. And I kind of realized they were being walked around and being shown around by an Imagineer who I've interviewed. His name is Scott Trowbridge. He's in charge of Star Wars at the Disney parks. So that made sense to me. And it kind of dawned on me, oh, we've got these additions coming up to Star Wars, to Star Tours. Maybe they were there getting a preview of the Mando stuff in Star Tours. Anyway, I just wanted to say hi. I just wanted to express my gratitude. And I went up to them. John and Dave were looking up at, in the Runaway Railway gift shop, there's a train that goes up around the edge of the ceiling. And they were looking up at that, standing there together. And I just went up and I went, I'm sorry to bother you guys. I just want to show you my phone case, which is the Beskar ingot from season 1 of The Mandalorian. And they reacted enthusiastically. They were like, oh, that's awesome. And Jon Favreau asked me if I wanted a picture with them. I did not ask them for that. But
love it when it happens that way. It makes it so much nicer.
I know. And I got the feeling like, oh, he's probably so used to this. This is how you get rid of people. You just ask them if they want a picture, right? It's over. Then they go their happy way. And that's kind of what happened. I took a picture with the both of them. They both seemed fine with it. And I said, I hope you enjoy the rest of your time at the parks or whatever. And I went off and I was super thrilled to have interacted with them. Favreau seemed super, super nice and gregarious. Dave Filoni came off as a little shy just in that moment. Haven't really interacted with him outside of that. But again, just to...
did he hide under his cowboy hat?
He didn't have the cowboy hat on. He was he was kind of incognito with a baseball cap on, and he was like carrying a backpack. And they had a group of other people. I don't know if it was their wives. I don't know what they look like, or other family members. But just super thrilling for me to very briefly meet them in the park and get a pic with them. Super nice. I hope here's the other thing. I was kicking myself because as I was like waiting there for them to come back out, I was like, I remember saying on this podcast, if I could ever talk to Jon Favreau, this is the question I want to ask him. And I could not remember what that question was. So somewhere out there, if somebody wants to go through the archive of Who's the Boss, all 180 episodes, figure out what that question was. The next time I see him, I'm going to ask him. But that's my only like minor regret, is I couldn't remember what that question was. Otherwise, I was like shaking for a couple hours afterwards. Anyway, are you that kind of person, Luke? Would you approach somebody like that, or would you just kind of let them be?
I am I would find it kind of awkward to do that myself.
Yeah.
Unless it is someone that I am, deeply. So I mean, like, I don't think that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni would be that for me specifically.
Okay.
But I get that for you, that's that they're creating a lot of the material that
Yes.
So for me, it would probably going back to like Doctor Who, like
Yeah.
if I ran into David Tennant or any who I have seen at Disneyland, um, but not like actually met. Um, any creative or actor from Doctor Who, I would that would probably be my
Yeah.
hi, how are
Yeah.
you?
Right. It's not too many people for me. These were definitely two of them. Glad I did it. Weird Al Yankovic is another one where every
Yeah,
time I've seen him, which has been surprisingly often, I think we like travel in the same like we go to the same kind of stuff in LA. I've seen him in person probably 8 or 9 times, and every time I've at least like said hi to him. I don't know if he has ever remembered me or recognized me, but he's super friendly as well. And I just again, it's another guy that I grew up being a big fan of, and I can't resist just briefly taking a moment of their time. But yeah, I'm not a celebrity hound in general, but I just wanted to tell that quick story. Met John and Dave at Disneyland. Let's get into the main topic of this week's episode. It's the Bad Batch. We got episode 5 of season 3. It's called The Return. But before we talk about that, let's ask Luke. Luke, what is your history with the Bad Batch? What were your thoughts on the previous 2 seasons of this show?
yeah. So I wanted to ask you because I can't quite remember. So the Bad Batch were first introduced in that final season of the Clone Wars, right?
Yes, the one that came out exclusively on Disney Plus. It was season
Okay.
7.
Okay.
Yep. It was
Yeah.
actually
So
so just to clarify too,
yeah.
that episode was actually originally planned for one of the later seasons of the Bad Batch. I think they showed a early form of that episode at one of the Star Wars celebrations, the Bad Batch introduction episode. So that was out there for years, just like in an early like form with the animation incomplete and everything. Then when they got that opportunity to do the final season on Disney Plus, they went back, finished the animation. They changed some stuff, I think, changed a little bit of the story around and completed it. I was kind of wondering when that came out why they did that, but because the episode had already kind of been out there. But once they announced the Bad Batch like spin-off series, I kind of understood, oh, you need that introductory arc for the Bad Batch in the Clone Wars to make all this make sense. But yeah, there you go.
Which I think was a clever idea to do. They had that
Yeah.
chance to do that final season, and then why not, introduce a new set of characters that can kind of
Yeah.
continue the story a little bit further. And I think it's been a pretty good run so far. This episode specifically, and we'll get into more details on it, but this felt very different to the previous 4, especially this season so far. There's been a lot of it's been a lot of doom and gloom
Yeah.
with Omega being captured and being in prison, sort of, kind of. So yeah, it's definitely been enjoyable. I remember, sometimes in Star Wars shows like this and some Marvel shows, towards the middle, you can kind of feel episodes being a little bit samey or a little not necessarily contributing towards the full picture, the full story. But I feel like everything here has been kind of
Yes.
moving things forward to where things are going to eventually end up in the finale. And I mean, even this episode was a little more low key than some of the others, I would say, sort of a little bit. But it's still progressing kind of the story of the Bad Batch themselves, and then also where things are going.
Yeah, I could hear you kind of dancing around the word filler, which is not something that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
yeah. I don't often use that word, but I do think there were episodes of season 1 and 2 of the Bad Batch that would qualify, like 16 episodes.
Yes.
It's a lot to fill up.
I definitely don't think that this week's was filler.
Yeah.
But there or any episode in this season so far, really.
Yeah.
But I remember last season, definitely. And I haven't gone through and rewatched anything
Right.
So I'm not super familiar. But with the last season, I remember feeling like a couple of episodes like that. I was like, this didn't really do anything for me this week.
Sure. Before we get into this week's episode in depth, so what did you think of? There was a 3-episode premiere a couple weeks ago. Then last week we had another episode. What did you think of this season so far prior to this week's episode?
Yeah, it was good. I like the fact that because correct me if I'm wrong, it was the first episode that was just all about Omega and where she's at.
Yeah.
And then the second episode kind of focused on how Hunter and Wrecker what they're up to and what they're trying to get to.
Correct.
And then, Omega, more details follow in. I was surprised to see the Palpatine appeared so early on in the season.
Yeah.
I was expecting that to be like and I feel like he might come back later towards the end once everything is revealed, but I feel like that was pretty cool seeing him, especially having Ian McDermott provide the voice.
Yes.
I think adding in the grand architect of everything that happens in Star Wars, it kind of takes these stories that feel separate from everything and kind of connects it to not in a bad way, but it kind of just makes everything feel part of the same universe more so by having the Emperor or a character similar to that in there. But yeah, no, I've really enjoyed this season so far.
Great. Yeah. Me too. I do think the tone of this season feels a little more serious to me.
Yes.
And I like that about it. Not that I've minded when it's more of a lark, I guess you would say. But yeah, I like when Star Wars takes itself seriously, I guess. And this is definitely doing that. This week's episode was called The Return. That's the title. It's directed by Nate Villanueva, written by Amanda Rose Munoz, and the story editor, I think, as with every episode, has been Matt Michnovitz. And let's talk a little bit about this week's episode. This is basically, to me, the function of this episode was to get the team back together, both physically and then emotionally, because Echo was off having adventures with Captain Rex, and then Crosshair has just now rejoined Clone Force 99 for the first time since he was basically a villain in the first 2 seasons. Now, I said it, he's had a face turn, term from professional wrestling, and then has come back and rejoined our heroes. What did you think of The Return, Luke?
Yeah, no, it was good. I think it was good to see. I particularly liked the moments where Echo kind of, oh, I'm sorry, not Echo, Omega kind of gravitated towards Crosshair.
Yeah.
And sort of I wouldn't say protected him, but kind of like mentored him almost in trying to patch things up with Hunter. Because, based off of the stuff that's happened over the last 2 seasons, there's obviously going to be some animosity between them.
Yeah.
It's not going to just immediately fix itself. And I think it was very cool to see Omega kind of being the glue that can kind of fit the 2 sides back together.
Yeah, agreed. I like that. I like that dynamic a lot. And I don't know. So I mentioned that Echo was off with Rex. We also got the return of Echo kind of to the team. I don't know if he's going to stick around or what, but it was nice having them all together. And you also definitely felt the absence of Tech, who,
yes,
as far as we know, has passed away, has fallen to his demise at the end of last season. But what do you think the function was of having Echo come back in at the same point where Crosshair has also returned to the team?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of trying to get things back to square one almost. Yeah. I have a feeling that we might not have seen the last of Tech. Maybe not for good.
Right.
I feel like maybe the Empire is up to something. But Yeah, no, I don't have any specific thoughts on Echo coming
Yeah,
back, but it felt right in the situation.
yeah. To me, I kind of felt like he was there to kind of balance out, to kind of give a voice, because Hunter obviously is very hesitant to forgive Crosshair, and understandably so.
Yeah,
Wrecker is just kind of like a big teddy bear, right? So he's like, I feel like he's gonna be able to forgive anybody no matter what. But then you kind of needed an adult for Omega to talk to briefly, who was kind of like a little bit of an outsider who can comment on the whole situation.
yeah, so a middleman basically.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. But let's talk about that animosity that you mentioned. What did you think of kind of Hunter's arc in this episode? Do you think he was in the right place at the beginning? And do you think it felt natural where he ended up by the end of this episode?
yeah, I think so. I think it felt natural. It might have been a little quick,
Yeah.
but that can also be attributed to their harrowing adventure with the worm creatures.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I definitely think it made sense for Hunter to be hesitant,
Yeah.
um, uh, based off of everything that he's done in the past. I think it was right. Obviously, and you can see the fact that he's there with Omega and the fact that they escape together. That automatically gives him a little bit of a head start
Yes.
in Hunter's feelings,
Right.
because they wouldn't have got out together if they didn't trust each other and work at it together. Um,
Absolutely.
so it's clear that he's changed, but is there something else behind it? I think it's right for him to be hesitant about that because they've went through some stuff in the last in the last few episodes. So they don't they've got Omega back and
Yeah.
don't want that to be ruined again.
Yeah, definitely. So basically that was the function of this storyline to me, is Crosshair earning the team's trust again, but especially Hunter. So he does that, yes, by returning Omega to the group at first, and like you said, that bought him a lot of headway, and then also he helps out with this whole worm situation. We should say, before we talk about the worms, I want to mention that this episode returns to a location from season 2 that was the location. Now, Sarah Woloski was on the show, was on Who's the Boss a couple weeks ago, and kind of teased that they would be going back here to the episode was called The Outpost in season 2, and I'm pretty sure I remembered this being a really, really great episode. It's the one where Crosshair basically has that face turn and turns his back on the Empire. He shoots and kills that Imperial officer, and we got him talking about that here this week. But did you find any further significance? Because I was trying to puzzle this out in my brain. Like, okay, they wanted to go to this outpost to get information. Crosshair had remembered it from when he visited there, and he thought they could, hack into the computers, get more information about Mount Tantus there. But like story wise and thematically, do you think there's any other significance of having this episode take place at that same location where Crosshair had that big character moment last season?
Yeah, I mean, I think deep down he might have wanted to visit there to kind of reconcile something with him and within himself.
Yeah.
And that's kind of shown by the scene where he's taking the clone trooper helmets and putting them up on a
Right.
mantle to kind of show some respect to them. So I think he wanted to. I think it was both a logistical choice in that, hey, this place is deserted and would work well, but also I feel like I have some personal unfinished business here, um, that might make him feel a little bit better.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Yeah, the unfinished business. Absolutely. Yeah. And he kind of says that because he wasn't being briefed while he was in captivity, he didn't know that it would be completely deserted. So maybe he was almost half expecting there to be still some clones stationed there that he might be able to help in some way. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or yeah. So let's. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention in the process of getting the power back on at this station, to me, I don't know if this jumped out to you, if you're a Jurassic Park fan or not, Luke, but I feel like almost every episode this season has had an homage to Jurassic Park in it for some reason. Like that seems to be their thing this season. But there's this moment where Omega is talking over the comm link to Wrecker, and Wrecker is off priming the pump on the breaker to turn the power back on, and it's like exactly like that scene from Jurassic Park. Did that jump out to you?
It didn't jump out to me,
Okay.
but I can see it.
Okay.
It does have that kind of Jurassic Park tone to it, but no, it didn't jump straight out at me. No.
Okay. Yeah, this is again one of those things where if I could talk to, and I'll never remember this, but if I had the moment to talk to the showrunners, I would ask them, like, do you have something for Jurassic Park? Like previously on this show, there were a lot of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom references. So it was like every episode, like, I think it was season 2, had something to do with Temple of Doom. And these are movies that I've seen, dozens and dozens of times in my life. So I pick up on that stuff. Jurassic Park and Temple of Doom, they're like etched in my brain. So when I see something that's like, seems like it might be inspired by that, I don't know. Curious if that is intentional or not. Let's talk about the worms. There's some giant snow worms. I don't think we saw them. Did we see them in the previous episode that took place here?
I don't remember them. I mean, I feel like it's one of those things. Like we've seen a lot of worms in the Star Wars universe, so
right.
I feel like we've seen this before, but maybe not this exact worm.
Right. What I thought was very coincidental, and this is one of those things where was this intentional? But this episode happens to be coming out the week after Dune Part 2 was released in theaters, and Dune, if you know the Dune franchise, there are giant worms that live under the sand in that franchise, both, in the novels, in the original David Lynch movie in 1984, and in both of the Denis Villeneuve movies that have come out recently. We've talked about how Dune has influenced Star Wars. George Lucas, I think, has admitted to as much. I think the Krayt Dragon in The Mandalorian reminded me of the sandworms from Dune. But what a weird coincidence that this episode would come out when everybody in the world is talking about Dune right now. Luke, what did you think of these snow worms? First of all, are you a Dune fan? Have you seen any of the movies? Have you read the books at all?
That is the good question to start with, because I have not.
Okay.
I haven't seen the movies, any of them, or read. I am completely. All I know is Timothy Shamalama Ding Dong's in it, and Zendaya.
Fair enough. Well, as somebody who doesn't know Dune, then what did you think of these worms kind of as the monster of the week in the Bad Batch?
Yeah, I mean, the Dune reference, the Dune thing doesn't pop into my head, and my first thought is it's kind of like, the Sarlacc pit, or the Krayt Dragon, like you said, from The Mandalorian. It's a very similar type thing, and it works. It's there to serve a function. I didn't find it to be particularly unique or anything, but and that's not really. I'm more interested in the story rather than the creature. Right. So, it's there to serve a point, and it worked for me.
Yeah, and the creature, like you say, the creature is really just there to serve the story. It's almost like it could have been anything, any threat out there. It also kind of reminded me of the movie Tremors from the late 80s, and then the like beacons that they have set up around the perimeter of this camp. That made me think of the TV show Lost. Did you ever watch that show?
No.
Okay. Well, there's a monster in that show, a smoke monster, and there's a village, and they have these electronic beacons that emit this pulse or whatever, and that keeps the monster out of the village. So that made me think of
Okay,
that.
that
But
makes
I think
sense.
this is
Yeah.
how my brain works. I guess I'm just comparing it to other stuff. Um,
That
I
works for me too. It's just
yeah,
unfortunately I haven't seen the other stuff.
okay, fair enough. Fair. I'm sure you've seen Jurassic Park, though, right?
Oh yeah.
You're okay. Anything else jump out to you, or anything else that you wanted to observe or discuss about this particular episode?
No. I'm glad it showed them getting back together, kind of
Yeah,
being, obviously there's still some animosity there between Hunter and Crosshair,
right.
but it was nice to kind of see the dynamic. I was pleased that it wasn't all animosity.
Yeah,
'Cause I think that could have got tiring really quickly. That I think there was just the right amount, and I think it leaves them in a good place to maybe bring back some of that teamwork as the season progresses.
yeah. They're kind of starting off again at a clean, sort of a clean slate as we go into the remaining episodes. By the way, that's a great segue to get into my final question about Bad Batch for today. What are you hoping for or expecting from the remaining? There's 10 episodes left in the entire series, Luke.
Yeah.
So not a whole lot left to go in the Bad Batch. What do you think's coming up? What do you hope is coming up?
So, like I said, I think we're going to get the Emperor back again.
Yeah.
I think we might have something come up with Tech. Um, I don't know where that's going to
Mhm.
go.
Okay.
My grand theory, and I don't know if this is something that you have been thinking about at all, but I think that this has some sort of connection to Snoke and
Oh, okay.
Palpatine's clones from the sequel trilogy. So I think somehow it's going to connect to that. Maybe that's too obvious. I don't
Yeah,
know,
no, I
but
think I think you're right. I would say yes, 100% on the clones. Will we get a reference to Snoke himself as like a failed clone? That's a good question because I know a lot of people had the same theory about Snoke with when the cloning stuff started popping up in the Mandalorian. When they saw like all those creatures in the weird like deformed bodies in the tanks in the
yeah,
Mandalorian, and people like, oh, they're gonna get into Snoke here, and they never did. Instead, it was Moff Gideon trying to clone himself. So will there be a Snoke reference in the Bad Batch? That would be very interesting because this is one of those big questions kind of lingering out there in the Star Wars universe. Why is Snoke the way he is? Because
what
yeah,
is the point?
right, right, and that would be clearly Palpatine takes credit for having created Snoke at the beginning of the Rise of Skywalker, but why is Snoke, he's bigger than Palpatine. He has a different voice. He's got Andy Serkis's voice. He looks different. He's got weird scars. What is the
Yeah.
history behind that character? There's a story to be told there. Will it be addressed in the Bad Batch? I don't know. Good question. But yeah, I think good stuff there to look forward to. Anything else you want to say about the Bad Batch before we move on?
No, I think we covered it all.
Great. Let's get into our final segment here on Who's the Boss. It's called First Steps into a Larger World. And yeah, my example for this week, by the way, this is the segment where we talk about the media we've been consuming and or enjoying outside of Star Wars. And my example that I had prepared was Dune Part 2, which I saw in IMAX at the Chinese Theater in
Oh,
Hollywood. Great movie going experience. We sat pretty close, which I was worried about at the beginning, but actually made me feel very immersed in the movie. Especially there's a big action scene where Timothy Chalamet's character Paul is riding one of the sandworms, and there's like a big POV shot of his perspective, and you almost kind of felt like you were on a Star Tours type attraction riding that worm
interesting.
with him. Yeah, it's a big spectacle action movie, sci-fi. Again, takes itself very seriously, which I always enjoy. I've been getting more into Dune as a franchise recently, so I'm excited to see this. I'm excited to see the third one whenever that comes out. Definitely a recommend on my part. How about you, Luke? Anything you've been watching, reading, playing video games, anything like that lately?
So my mind went into a completely different realm. I don't know how into anime you are.
Almost not at all. That's one of my big gaps in my pop
Okay.
culture knowledge.
And it's not a huge thing for me. I grew up watching like Dragon Ball Z, Yu-Gi-Oh, those types of like very accessible to American shows.
Yeah.
But there's one anime that I watched a little bit of a kid from the 90s called Yu Yu Hakusho.
Okay.
And I have been like watching 2 or 3 episodes a night for like the last month, actually getting to watch the show and realizing it is a very well done show and well put together show, both in terms of the animation style, even the English dub from the early 2000s is really
Okay.
good. So yeah, that's what I've been watching a lot of recently. Aside from that, it's just, like I'll be watching the Bad Batch
Yeah.
when that comes out, obviously, and yeah, nothing too much else exciting going on at the moment as far
Okay.
as shows and movies go. Um,
Yeah,
that
I'm not the biggest anime guy. I'm definitely not the biggest, but I watched some of like Cowboy Bebop was big for us in
Okay,
college. That's like a big chunk of my anime knowledge. And then like as far as like Japanese animation goes, I love Miyazaki and like Studio
oh yeah,
Ghibli, but I don't know if would you even call that anime or what does that qualify? Not really.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if it would be anime
Yeah.
because they're movies instead, but
Yeah, okay.
there's many different um
Okay.
ways to phrase it, and I'm not too well versed in that.
The,
But yeah, no, I haven't seen all of his movies, but
yeah,
I've seen quite a
same
few, and
here.
I love most of them.
Yeah, same with me. As far as anime goes, like I kind of feel about it the way you mentioned earlier about the books and novels, like the High Republic part of Star Wars. Like it would
Yeah,
be tricky to find like an entry point. Like I hear about anime shows like what's the one that just got the live action
One
adaptation?
Piece.
One Piece. Yeah. I heard everybody talking about that all over the place, and I looked and I saw it's like how many episodes of that show are
That
there?
show has like 1,000,
A
so
thousand
like
episodes.
that is one where it's like that one is extremely hard to get into. The Yu Yu Hakusho for me is like it's a show from the 90s. It only
Yeah.
has about 120 episodes, I think.
Okay.
So it's very a lot easier to get into than say
Okay.
like One Piece or a lot of other ones that have been around for a while. Even like Dragon Ball is there's a lot more to it.
Right. Yeah, I think just because of like not having as much time as I used, like when I was a teenager or whatever, maybe even my early adulthood, I just had hours and hours to sit and just consume long TV series, and I
Uh-huh.
just don't have that kind of time anymore. So I'm always hesitant. Like because we have the X-Men 97 show coming up. I think it's coming like a week or two from now.
Yeah.
I wanted to watch all of the X-Men cartoon from the 90s to get ready for that. And I got like a dozen episodes in and I got distracted and I never did it. And I'm like totally regretting it.
That was my thought too, because
Yeah.
I remember watching some of those when I was younger. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, like man, this would probably be a good conversation to have with our Marvel
Yes.
contributor Mac. But how how integral is your knowledge of the past series going to be to watching the new one?
Yeah.
If I
And
can watch this new one without having to watch the
yeah.
past one, that's probably what I'll go with, just
It,
based off of
yeah.
sheer time.
It might be smart. Maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll just go and watch like the last arc or whatever, last few
Yeah.
episodes. Who knows? We'll find out very soon. That's going to bring us to the end of this week's episode of Who's the Boss. We got 2 comments, so let's just address those. Hi to Sonia out there, and then
Hi.
hey to Boxing Man. I like your avatar. It's like a Men in Black kind of guy in sunglasses. Okay, Luke, thank you so much for coming back on the show. Hope you enjoyed it.
I
Thanks for
did, yeah.
chatting Star Wars with me. Hope you come back again. Maybe talk about some other show later on. Do you want to send people somewhere? Do you want to plug anything? Do you want people to find you on social media? Anything like that?
Yeah, I mean my X account is Luke 94, so I share some I don't really have anything specific going on there. I just talk about
Okay.
theme parks every now and then, or if I'm really into a movie or a show, I'll probably share my opinion of that. And sometimes just sharing some fun stuff. But other than that, you'll find me on laughingplace.com.
Great.
Got news articles on there, and then sometimes if I'm feeling fun, we'll have some more in-depth stuff too.
Cool. Yeah, Laughing Place is a good place to find both of us. As
Yeah.
always, all your Disney news and opinions on laughingplace.com. I want to continue plugging my other podcast that I do outside of Laughing Place called Pop Culture Explorers Club. We're about 5 or 6 episodes into this, but we're having a blast with it. Luke, you got to come on this show to talk about Doctor Who at some point, because
Yeah, I'd love to.
I am a complete Doctor Who novice, and I want to learn more about it. So maybe we'll have you on and chat about that.
I can definitely do that for you. I can
Sweet.
teach you anything you need to know.
Great. This week's episode of Pop Culture Explorers Club is an Oscar preview, by the way. We talked about all 10 Best Picture nominees. So that's the kind of stuff we can't do on Who's the Bossk. And you can find it over there at Pop Culture Explorers Club, wherever you get your podcasts. Next episode of Who's the Bossk next week is going to be all about The Bad Batch again, season 3, episode 6. So look forward to that. Otherwise, you can find me on Instagram at Who's the Bossk Pod, and you can see my picture there with Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, who, if you're out there, I know you're out there somewhere in the universe. Thank you for being kind to me, because I bothered you for a moment there at Disneyland. So thanks again. See you real soon. My name is Mike. Thanks again, Luke. See you soon. Bye.
Take care.
Let's end the stream.